All right, so I'm coming at this with more context than most of you will have, but I haven't looked at this code in over 2 months, so it kind of is going to be a rediscovery for me as well, despite the fact that I originally created it. Let's go in and just discuss a little bit about what the sort of process of an Alexa app interacting with us is. So when we come here, we'll say that we have a webhooks endpoint for Alexa webhooks, and eventually, obviously, it'll have this flag here for whether it's enabled or not. But actually, you know what? I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if we will have that, maybe as a feature flag. But anyway, you have this endpoint here that receives an Alexa webhook. If you go through webhooks, Alexa webhooks, you end up with a tool consisting of a length of material. Oh, never mind. She thinks I'm talking to her again.
Such that it can be used to grab onto, connect, or otherwise attach itself onto another object.
Okay. Arigato. Okay, I'm going to hit mute on that. All right, so coming back to where we were, we're looking at the Alexa webhooks controller. It's creating a model called the incoming, an incoming webhook, which we have webhooks both outbound and inbound in Bullet Train, so we have to namespace that. We couldn't just use webhooks and assume that that was one or the other. So we have this webhooks incoming Alexa webhook, and so we will look at that. And once this is processed, so there's a little bit of processing that goes on here where we have this gem that we use called Alexa Ruby. And we're just checking here whether this Alexa webhook is being sent to a membership. And what that means is the conversation that is being had, is this webhook part of a conversation that is happening with somebody who is already registered in the system? So I'll show you what that looks like. If we go to membership, it's checking whether the membership is present. So if you want to see how that is found, we're looking for any membership in the system, not scoped by team, not scoped by anything, because we don't have that much context on this webhook. All we have is the Alexa user ID. And so we will find the membership that is linked to a specific Alexa user ID, and that's the indication that we have a conversation already established. So for, when we say that this is to a membership, we can check if the spoken text is present. So the spoken text comes to us in the payload, the webhook payload right here. So if the spoken text is present, then we need to update this comment here so that it says Alexa. We don't call it Alexa because Alexa also enables telephone conversations. That comment isn't even true, so I can actually just get rid of that. Although I should get rid of that in the branch. In the development branch that we pulled in. So this conversation, so we find the conversation so a membership can have many different conversations because there's different channels that somebody can be interacting with the system via. So they can be using Alexa, they can be using SMS, and in the future, other platforms as well. So this membership has conversations, and we're trying to find the conversation for the channel called Alexa. Then we will create a incoming message object on that conversation with the body of the spoken text. And then when we process that incoming message, it will spit out an outgoing response. If there are outgoing messages, and there can be more than one, so this is helpful for platforms like SMS where you actually send the response in multiple steps. For each of those outgoing messages, if the outgoing message, and there's a different part of the domain model which we won't look at right now, but in the outgoing message, when that response is created, you can specify whether the response is another question which requires a response, from the user. And if it is, we ask, and otherwise we tell. And that the only nuance there is, does the system wait for a response after it says this thing, or does it just end the interaction? So with Alexa, it's a little bit strange actually, and we'll have to figure this out. I'm not sure if I ever got around to solving this nuance, but with Alexa, the difference is that with SMS messages, there's not a difference between asking and telling. You just, you send the message, and if it was a question, they will respond. And if it's not a question, they won't respond. But with Alexa, you actually have to, you can't just send a message out of nowhere. So in order to ask a question, you have to keep the dialogue open and specifically mention to the API when you provide this response, hey, we need you to listen for the response and send it back to us and keep this conversation going. So that was, one of the helpful things about using Alexa as part of this project, the conversational sort of logic right from the get-go, because that would have been a fall that would have fallen down in the abstraction later if I hadn't done it right at the beginning. So that was kind of, I think, worked out really well to use Alexa and SMS. Anyway, that's how this works. So it is piping the incoming message and then processing on the conversation. So let's look at that conversation model. And you'll see a lot of things going on, like a lot of logic here. But let's look at the process incoming message. So for process incoming message, let's see here. This membership already has a user associated with it. And so this is interesting. Okay, so I'm going to separate this into a different video just because this is a logical breaking point where I've just shown you the plumbing of getting the message to the conversation logic, kind of the plumbing of, hey, we receive it at this endpoint and then we route it through to this point. Now it's a whole different ballgame. This is not Alexa logic anymore. This is the abstraction of a conversation that exists in Bullet Train, and that really deserves its own video.